Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to call this meeting number 52 of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage to order. And today's business, pursuant to Standing Order 1082, we are doing a study on Omni programming changes. With us today from Rogers Media, we have Keith Pelly, the President. We have Colette Watson, Vice President, Television and Operations, and Susan Wheeler, Vice President, Regulatory Media from Rogers Communications. So for 8 minutes, or up to 8 minutes, we have Mr. Pelly, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. We also have Paratosh Mehta, who is in the back, who is our head of independent production from Omni, as well as Heidi Bunnell, who is our Vice President of Federal Government Relations, who is also in the audience. So thank you for the opportunity to appear and talk about Omni, the challenges it faces as an over-the-air ethnic television station, and our thinking behind the program strategy we have recently put in place. So our remarks today will focus on 3 key areas: Rogers' 30-year investment in Canadian ethnic television, the challenge to Omni's business model, and the need for policy and regulation to keep pace with market changes. So I'll pass it over to Colette, our VP of Omni.
Nous reconnaissons qu'Omni joue un rôle.
We know that Omni plays a vital and essential role in reflecting and connecting Canada's multicultural and multilingual communities. We have had the privilege of working alongside ethno-cultural communities and organizations for over 30 years and believe we have made a meaningful contribution to the engagement and integration of these communities in Canadian society. We remain an important partner to many different ethno-cultural communities through direct investments in local programming and marketing and participation in festivals, events, and on diverse boards and committees. We take this role seriously and believe our record of performance over the past 30 years has exceeded Canadian ethnic service standards in terms of the quantity, quality, and distribution of Canadian ethnic programming available to consumers. In fact, until 2 years ago, when we gave over $1 million to an independent community group to launch an ethnic television station in Montreal, we were the only ethnic over-the-air television broadcaster in Canada, a responsibility we believe we have upheld well despite troubling financial challenges.
This year, I was given a mandate to refresh the Omni brand to make it more relevant to the next generation of ethno-cultural viewers and to stem its financial losses to a break-even position. The mandate wasn't driven by profits. It was about making Omni self-sustaining. Omni supports 3 types of Canadian programming. 1, in-house local production, which included our language newscasts and information programs. 2, national independent productions. And 3, local independent production. Local in-house production is by far the most expensive of these programming categories, since the station bears 100% of the costs and risk. In the last broadcast year, the language newscasts we produced cost over $9 million on an unallocated basis, $11.7 if you include overhead costs, and garnered only $5.8 million in revenue. After several years of losses, it was clear we had to find another more sustainable model for our in-house production. Omni
also makes significant investments in ethnic drama and documentary programming. Since 2002, Omni has committed and spent almost $65 million in the licensing and development of Canadian ethnic and third language independent drama and documentary productions through tangible benefits contributions. With this investment, which is unmatched by any other Canadian ethnic broadcaster, Omni has played a foundational role in the creation of this type of content and in fostering the Canadian ethnic independent production sector.
Has produced over 600 hours of ethnic and third language dramas and documentaries. This year, we're very proud to launch Omni's first serialized drama, Blood and Water, which was shot in Vancouver and Toronto in Chinese and English. We are very excited about this project and hope it will resonate with current audiences and attract new viewers to Omni. The rest of our Canadian ethnic programming is comprised of local independent production. We work with 49 local ethnic producers in 48 languages across all our Omni stations. We use a model where we provide local ethnic producers with airtime, and in return we share the revenues generated from advertising in the program. This model has worked well and provides an important outlet for local expression. But unfortunately, revenues from this type of programming will never be able to sustain our in-house production investments. Our in-house production remains subsidized by our foreign-acquired programming. In setting out to refresh the Omni brand, we sought input from Omni staff, including its community liaison officers. We spoke with our regional advisory councils, and we conducted a number of strategic reviews, all intended to identify the right programming strategy and business model for Omni going forward. The feedback we received was that Omni's programming was not highly visible. It was seen as tired and outdated, particularly by young viewers who are the key demographic for advertisers. Moreover, our market research indicated that where at one time new Canadians came to this country knowing only the language of their country of origin, many now come to Canada proficient in either English or French. This research also indicated that more and more Canadians are looking to alternate and online sources for their news programming. Alternate online sources. This trend has made it even more difficult to attract broad audiences to our traditional newscasts. All of this suggested that a new approach is required. And I'd like to make clear that this wasn't just about cutting costs to save money. It was really about reinvigorating the Omni brand and its programming. We simply saw a better opportunity to engage a broader audience on local issues with new local current affairs programs. Unlike newscasts, current affairs programming has a flexible format that allows members of the community to engage and interact on local issues. It also provides a greater opportunity to delve deeper into issues, exploring a variety of different angles and perspectives, which is something formal newscasts cannot do. Contrary to what you may have heard, we have not reduced the number of languages or hours of local programming Omni offers. The national Mandarin, Punjabi, and Cantonese newscasts have all been replaced with local current affairs programs in those languages, which we believe will better resonate with local audiences. In most cases, we've kept the same on-air talent, which preserves the trust and continuity our people have built with audiences over many years. Our Italian newscast will be replaced with novellas and a new Italian lifestyle program that is scheduled to launch this fall. We're also extremely excited to launch a new national Punjabi lifestyle program called Kitty Talk, which will feature 3 dynamic women as they discuss the issues of the day that are important to their communities. And these are just a few examples of Omni's new programming direction, which is based on a more sustainable production model and is designed to attract new and broader audiences. While there is no guarantee this new approach will succeed, we are very much encouraged by the positive feedback we have received from viewers and community organizations about this new strategy.
Thanks, Colette. Now, Omni is operating, as you probably know, in an extremely competitive environment that is being transformed daily by the introduction of new and unregulated digital platforms, changes to video consumption patterns, and shifts in advertising revenue to digital platforms. In order to understand Omni's financial situation, it's important to understand the over-the-air television sector. Advertising on conventional television is declining at a torrid pace. This is not just a couple of years. This is not cyclical. This is a structural change. And unfortunately, Omni, as the smallest and the most niche player in the marketplace, feels the pain. Since 2011, Omni's advertising revenue has dropped from $80 million to this year. Advertising revenue will be about $22 million. Omni's business model has been very simple over the past number of years. The U.S. programming, the strip programming, i.e. 2.5 Men, The Simpsons, has been the reason why it has been successful. It has funded all the ethnic programming. So, for example, in 2011, there was $55 million in ad revenue to the U.S. programming against $30 million in costs. But now with that ad revenue gone away, we were making $25 million on the U.S. programming, and we allowed that to be spent on the ethnic programming. But the way that the industry has changed and the way that people are consuming consumption now, it has changed it dramatically, and as a result, Right? We no longer can fund the ethnic programming like we did because the U.S. programming is not generating that type of margin anymore. So we've had to significantly change. Omni was hit hard by the extension of CTV2 in the marketplace. Omni is facing intense competition from not only the over-the-air and the piracy challenges that the broadcast industry is facing, but Canadian distributors now carry over 130 foreign ethnic specialty services. This, unfortunately, as I've said over and over again, is not 1979 anymore. And I know because we're running out of time here, so I'm going to just pass it to Susan quickly to talk a little bit about some of the regulatory challenges that we faced with Omni.
Over the last 3 years, we made several attempts to raise awareness about Omni's financial challenges and have suggested tangible policy and regulatory changes for how the system can support and govern OTA ethnic television in Canada. In 2013, we met with representatives from each of your political parties and walked through Omni's financial challenges and made recommendations on how the government can support ethnic programming. Specifically, we recommended giving the CMF a mandate to support language, news, and information programming. Last year, we asked for several changes to Omni's license at our renewal hearing. We believe many of these changes would have helped Omni drive the revenue needed to support its in-house production. All but one of these requests were rejected. Even as recently as this fall, we were asked to appear before the Senate committee reviewing the mandate of the CBC to talk about our challenges with Omni and how we were making the station work given its financial situation. We made it very clear that major changes were needed to make the stations financially viable. In addition to these efforts, we have discussed Omni's financial situation with our regional advisory councils, who are comprised of independent representatives from the communities and organizations involved in local diversity community. While we wish we were here under different circumstances, we do welcome the opportunity to draw attention yet again to Omni's financial situation and hope it will encourage and expedite a discussion of new policy and regulatory framework for free ethnic television.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation. We are now going to go to Mr. Fantino for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for attending here today. And on a matter of significant importance to the Punjabi, Cantonese, Mandarin, and Italian-speaking Canadians, of which we have a figure of about 1.8 million. Since the cancellation of Omni's Italian language newscast, many of my constituents and many in the Italian-Canadian community in Ontario have contacted me and to express their concern about this particular decision that you have taken. For Italian Canadians in Ontario, it was a much more personal transgression, as Omni, then CFMT itself, was founded by a prominent Italian Canadian, Dan Iannuzzi. Indeed, I would like to share some of those comments. One person noted, and I quote, "It is time to take Rogers Communications to task. They have grown and prospered on the backs of immigrants who were new to Canada and subscribed to their services. Italo-Canadians accepted every aspect of their changing organization and contributed to the growth and prosperity of Rogers of today, and Ted Rogers would be rolling in his grave," end quote. Another noted, "My parents-in-laws, like being able to keep up to date with what goes on, are very saddened at the loss of Omni News Italian edition." I can go on with a number of others. Recently, Ms. Watson, you, a senior executive at Rogers, had a very flippant response to concerns that I had raised publicly on behalf of my constituents about the cancellation of the local ethnic newscasts, indeed here. And I understand, and if I don't have your quote, you can correct me. You spoke to the Globe and Mail, and the quote is, as reported, "This is a private sector business. Does Julian Fantino go to Walmart and say you need to have more stuff in certain language?" That's pretty bizarre. It's an insult, really, for someone at Rogers to make, as well as we all know that unlike Walmart, Rogers has obligations stemming from its CRTC-issued license to broadcast on public airwaves. Further, I want to read from a transcript from a CRTC hearing from April 2014 on the renewal of Omni's license. Specifically, I want to read the testimony of Madeleine Zynak, the former National Vice President of Omni Television, and I quote, During its proud history of broadcasting, Omni has played a critical role in developing ethnic programming in Canada and serving ethnocultural audiences. We are an important partner to many different ethnocultural communities through the provision of local news programming and participation in events, festivals. We know that this was a very meaningful and important vehicle for communities. But here we are, a little over a year later, and Rogers has cancelled Italian, Cantonese, Mandarin, and Punjabi newscasts. In Ms. Zynak's testimony for the Omni license renewal, where she waxed eloquently in local news programming and its importance to Omni, and why didn't Rogers reveal during their plans to cancel all news programming within the very near future? Doesn't that seem a little odd that Rogers would omit to mention that very fact? Especially I note from the CRTC July 2014 broadcasting decision, there is a clear expectation for licensees to provide at the time of licensing and license renewal specific plans as to how the station will reflect local issues and concerns during the terms of their licenses. I fully appreciate that Rogers and Omni are in a business per se, but I more reflect on what was said to a licensing body that within a very short time thereafter seems to have become a flip-flop. So why the apparent misrepresentation, and why did we not hold true to what was stated to the CRTC? And Mr. Chair, I can wait for the answer.
Okay. Thank you very much. To be totally honest, that comes as an overwhelmingly surprise to me, because for 3 years I have been talking about the challenges that Omni faces. We have spoken to every ethnic group. We have spoken to the Ethnic Council. We've spoken to the Senate. What is the Senate Committee? The Senate Committee. We spoke to the Conservatives. We spoke to the Liberal Caucus. We spoke to the NDP. The fact that this comes as a bit of a surprise or somewhat of a shock is really, quite honestly, somewhat surprising. And it's very easy, with all due respect, to select a couple of phrases that came out of that hearing. But we were pretty clear in the hearing that if, in fact, we were not able to get license changes that we requested, and we requested a plethora of them, that there would be gargantuan changes to Omni coming. We made our first changes, and then again we congregated with all the respective groups, but these were going to come. The industry has changed dramatically. Unfortunately, ethnic programming and the audiences have deteriorated significantly, and the ad revenue just cannot match the actual programming costs. We, in every aspect of Omni, are meeting our conditions of license. And that is very important for you to understand, because under no circumstance are we not in compliant with the license that we have. We are in compliant in every particular way. And at the same time, we do believe that we continue to invest in ethnic programming. We continue to invest in Omni. There would very easily, for any private business that lost cash in, cash out, almost $12 million in 2014, with a continued deterioration of the ad revenue, would be very likely to just say, maybe we shouldn't be in this business. But instead, we congregated as a group. We came up with different strategies, what we thought was more compelling programming to a millennial demographic, which the advertisers are seeking. And we developed a very robust strategy. Like Colette said, this is the very first time we have ever done a serial drama in a different language. So, with all due respect, sir, I do differ in what we communicated to the CRTC and what we've communicated to the Liberals, to the NDP, and to the Conservatives.
Okay, thank you very much. We're now going to move to Ms. Sims for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. And first of all, let me say that in my community in Surrey, BC, the Lower Mainland and the Punjabi-speaking community across the country, coast to coast to coast, they are very, very disturbed and actually quite angry at the cuts they are seeing. And the chat shows or the talk shows that you've just mentioned do not cut it and replace the news items that are being cancelled. I also want to quote from a statement made by you on March the 5th, 2015. Holding a television license is a privilege that comes with important obligations that are in the public interest, especially in regards to high-quality news coverage and reporting. An informed citizenry cannot be sacrificed for a company's commercial interests. Canadians can only wonder how many times corporate interests may have been placed ahead of fair and balanced news reporting they expect from their broadcasting system. We expect Canada's broadcasters, I'll say the rest, basically you can imagine the rest, and we can send you the letter as well. So it's very, very clear that you have abandoned the very principles you put forward in here, where you specifically talk about news and how that cannot be sacrificed for commercial interests. What changed?
Again, I beg to disagree and say that if we actually went through the transcript of the CRTC and we spent 3 hours on it, I don't think that we would have the exact same opinion. I believe that we have been totally upfront, and at the exact same time, we have also continued to serve the ethnic community. And once again, if you're not willing to change, and you're not willing to change and follow where consumers want to be, then you shouldn't probably own a broadcast license. But to be honest with you, all of excuse me, let me finish.
Sorry, Mr. Pelly, we only have 7 minutes and we have a number of people.
Okay.
Mine was specifically what had changed, but as you said, I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Sullivan right now.
This issue is huge, as Mr. Fantino has already said, in the Italian community, both in my riding of York South-West and in Toronto generally, so much so that the Italian Consul General called a meeting and brought 70 representatives of the Italian community to complain about this decision, which came to them as a shock. Giuseppe Pastorelli was the Italian Consul General, and the president of Comitas, the new president, Emilio Battaglia, and the Honorable Joe Volpe, who publishes Corriere Canadese, all have said this decision is a shock to that community. Many in the Italian community came to Canada years ago, speak little or no English, so they relied on Omni for their news of Canada in Italian. And that is now gone, and is not going to be replaced by anything till this fall when some kind of lifestyle program is coming that's aimed at younger people. So we have abandoned an entire demographic of the Italian community. They will no longer be receiving any news, and with an election coming, it's like voter suppression. These people will not be able to be engaged in the electoral process. At the license hearings, you committed to adhere to the standard conditions of license applicable to English language conventional television stations, which includes the expects the licensee, and I say the word expects, and I know you're going to yell, well, that's not a condition, it's an expectation. Expects the licensee to maintain a local presence, and a local presence includes providing 7-day-a-week original local news coverage distinct to the market, employing full-time journalists, which you don't anymore, and operating a news bureau or gathering office in the market. That's what you committed to do to live up to those expectations, and I know there's a difference in the words, but with a federal election on the horizon, the Italian community is up in arms. They are fuming, and they were talking boycotting Rogers, which I don't believe you'd want them to do, but they are concerned that a big part of that community will no longer have access to be engaged in Canadian society in the way that they were. And with all respect to all of the dire predictions, you can't just take news in isolation and say news doesn't make money, therefore we're cutting out news. All the broadcasters in Canada would stop producing news if that was the attitude, because nobody makes a ton of money doing news. That's not what the licenses are for. The licenses are a license to give Canadians information as per the Broadcast Act. And I'm sorry, lifestyle programming for a younger audience doesn't cut it.
Yeah, well, the first comment that I would say is the CRTC has recognized the challenge, and people would drop news, and hence the reason that English news services had 91H status in the last CRTC hearing. So, so there is a recognition that news, not only in ethnic languages, but is struggling in English Canada as well, based on the fact that you can get news anywhere, and there are just a plethora of opportunities where you can get your news. As far as the Italian, and again, I don't want to get into selecting quotes and so forth from individual transcripts or so forth, because it would be very easy to go through the entire conversation that I had with Mr. Cash, your colleague, about this exact challenge.
I've got a question myself. I know
Okay.
we're running out of time there. I do want to echo what my colleagues have said in regards to the ethnic news being cut, especially the Punjabi one and the Cantonese one in Lower Mainland. It serves a very vital link for people to get not only Canadian news in the language they understand, but also news from abroad where they're able to keep links with that country wherever they have come from. And, you know, getting a license is a privilege. It comes with a responsibility, and I believe you're not living up to that responsibility of providing that content for the license that you got. And people are very, very upset in my community. I want to echo that here in this committee. And like Mr. Sullivan has said, and they're thinking about boycotting Rogers in regards to other services that you provide. And it's not always, you know, in one component you're going to make money, others you're going to lose, but it's the whole package that you have to deliver. And I have to convey this from my constituents that I think in this case you guys have failed.
Well, I think with all due respect, again, we are living up to the conditions of our license, so I strongly disagree with your comments.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move to Mr. Vaughn for 7 minutes.
You've made a number of comments about the business model, which we appreciate is changing, and certainly those of us who have worked in the industry understand it to be changing. What I don't understand is why you have formally used U.S. programming to subsidize multilingual programming. As a platform provider and not simply a content provider, you have a robust business model, all of it granted to you by federal statute. Why are you not using those other privileges granted to you by the CRTC, such as being Rogers as a cable provider, which is gaining revenue as a result of media changes? Why are you not cross-subsidizing within your larger corporation? Why are you choosing only to cross-subsidize within Omni?
Well, Omni only has one revenue source, which is ad revenue. Doesn't have secondary.
No, I appreciate that. The question is, why aren't you using Rogers' full spectrum of revenue streams to cross-subsidize to sustain a promise of performance that you've made to the CRTC?
Omni is not a not-for-profit organization. Omni is a separate entity that is part of a private company that runs as a separate entity with a separate P&L. And if it was a not-for-profit or if it was a charitable organization, we could have that conversation. But that's
you're misunderstanding the question, and I hope it's not deliberately misunderstanding the question. Rogers has a number of broadcast platforms which it is given privilege to broadcast in. It has a number of telecommunications operations. To fulfill your promised performance of multilingual programming, which is the reason the station exists, why have you not chosen to cross-subsidize through the Rogers family of businesses? Why have you chosen to have Omni stand alone when other wings of Rogers cross-subsidize one another?
Well, because we can't have those conversations.
Why not?
We can't, because you're not permitted to. You're not permitted to actually discuss with the cable company what you're going to do with your media companies.
No, you have several television stations.
Correct.
And those stations could be used to cross-subsidize to sustain your promised performance with the CRTC.
Oh, but City's losing money as well. So what you're saying is the profit that Sportsnet is to subsidize Omni. Well, that's not the way you run a private business, sir. You know, you have to actually look at it individually. You're not going to subsidize one business for another business. You have to look to see if they're all sustainable on their own. And Omni, which I've been saying for the last 3 years, under the current model with the current conditions of license, is not sustainable in this structurally changing world.
If this station was created to serve multilingual communities locally, and you can no longer fulfill that mandate, why don't you surrender the license?
Because I believe that we are meeting every condition of license. As we have to broadcast in 20 different languages, we're broadcasting in 48 different languages.
And if the local communities disagree, and if the local communities say that they're not being served by the change, i.e. the change from switching news to lifestyle or current affairs into infotainment, and if they don't want the change from local news and simply gaining international news, if the local communities that you're required to serve are not happy with the product that's being served, and if your audience continues to diminish as a result, and that's what the argument you put in front of us is, why wouldn't you surrender the license and allow broadcasters who want to perform those duties step up and take over the channel?
Well, first, we haven't seen ones that would like to take on these conditions of license. However, why don't we adjust? Why don't we see where we are in a year from now? Because I beg to differ as well. The news programming has, for example, in Italian alone, in 3 years, the ratings have eroded 68%. So let's see how the new programming and the new strategy works, but let's not evaluate it right away before we've had a chance to actually see how it works.
Even though it contradicts your promise of performance?
I'm sorry?
It contradicts the spirit of your promise of performance.
I totally disagree. So I'm going to say the exact same thing, that we are living up to our conditions of license, and it does not whatsoever. The actual dollars that we've put into the ethnic community based on changing the strategy, with all due respect, does not in any such way live up to the spirit of the Omni license.
You disagree that you have an obligation to provide local news programming?
I agree that we have an obligation to live up to the conditions of license that we were given by the CRTC, and we are doing that in spades.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vaughn. We'll now go to Mr. Leung for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to address this issue perhaps from a financial viability side. And I've been a public accountant before, and I somehow don't understand how your finances work with the trend of our current immigration patterns. Canada brings in about 280,000 immigrants a year, over half of whom which settles in Toronto, and the other, say, a third or so in the other urban centres. That means there's 90,000 people coming into Toronto. On top of that, we also have 100,000 students, foreign students that come in, and I specifically indicate that a lot of these would come from China or Mandarin Cantonese-speaking countries. And again, over half of them come to Toronto. That's 50,000 students coming to Toronto. The total increase in the Toronto population of the Greater Toronto population of 4 million is over 130,000 Mandarin or Cantonese speakers that are coming in here. On top of that, more than half of the Chinese, more than a third, more than 500,000 Chinese live in the Greater Toronto area. And I would say about probably 90% of them are first generation who will probably have an understanding of either one Cantonese and Mandarin. Now, what I don't understand is that as far as recent as 2010 and 2011, you're making a profit. It was a viable operation. What has changed between 2010 to the current situation and to your forecast situation that has made this dramatic drop? I mean, have your internal costs increased tremendously? I don't see why you would not go after this population, this increase in population with selling more advertising and so on to gain that market share. And then finally, the last question is that why will you throw away that market share?
Well, to be candid with you, I'll answer it 2 ways very quickly. The network was always funded, and the ethnic programming was always subsidized by the U.S. programming. So U.S. programming in 2012 generated $55 million in revenue versus a cost of $30 million. In 2013, that revenue dropped to $35 million, so we dropped our cost to $18 million of the U.S. programming. It dropped to $20 million in 2014. So that is a $35 million drop of the U.S. programming that always had a large margin that funded the ethnic programming. I want to definitely, squash the myth that ethnic programming, cash in, cash out, is not large enough to generate the advertising dollars to support the actual news programming. It's not any more complicated than that. Nobody from our team wanted to do what we had to do. But as the industry changed, and when you lose $58 million in ad revenue, you are going to have to make some changes. And with all due respect to the actual ethnic advertising, when you are drawing as small numbers, and ratings is nothing more than a form of currency, when you're drawing tiny numbers, advertisers will not spend big dollars against it. It's as simple as that. And your people that are coming in are pirating more than many other ethnic groups, and at the exact same time, the opportunity to actually subscribe to a network in their specific language is now commonplace, with over each broadcast distribution unit carrying over 130 specific language networks.
Could you give us some clarification regarding your U.S. programming? How that chunk? Why are you not able to maintain it, or why is that not no longer in existence?
Why is that?
Why did we lose that? I mean, you mentioned about the U.S. component.
Because now you had the emergence of Netflix. Netflix used to be in 1 million homes. Now it's in 4 million homes. So strip programming, which Omni strip programming, meaning taking 2.5 Men or 30 Rock or something like that, that it would air 7 o'clock every night, would generate large audience numbers and large advertising. That has just shrunk. The advertising has shrunk, the ratings has shrunk as competition has become, and the ability to get that programming now in so many different places, whether it be over the top, whether it be an internet, whether it be other networks, or whether it be our own service like Show Me or Netflix. So the U.S. programming has significantly gone down. And not only on Omni, we were just the first to be hit.
And I also want to follow on with Mr. Vaughan's line of thinking, and this is, Rogers is a fairly modern, sophisticated communication technology company, and it defies me that why you cannot use other channels of delivery, whether it's internet, whether it's through cell phone, whether it's there must be other channels that you can use in order to improve that newscast, improve that.
No. What you're asking is for another part of our business to subsidize Omni, and that just, from a pure, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders to make the sound economic decisions. You can't take a network like Sportsnet or a network like FX or another part of our business to subsidize a business that just isn't viable. That just wouldn't be sound business practice. And anybody that has worked in the private sector would, to be honest with you, after looking at all facets of our business at Omni, I'd be surprised if you all didn't come to the same resolution.
Well, how is the impact of some of these other stations like Fairchild, some of these more single language dedicated stations? How have they impacted you, and how can you work, or can you work cooperatively with them, or not?
Well, Tele Latino currently makes about $10 million, but Tele Latino has two forms of revenue. It has sub revenue and it has advertising revenue. Omni has advertising revenue, and that is all it has. So the specialty networks all have two forms of revenue. It's hence the reason that conventional broadcasting, not just Omni, is in trouble. And if changes aren't happening, then you're going to see the likes of CTV, you're going to see the likes of City, and you're going to see the likes of Global, and you're going to see the overall over-the-air networks change dramatically in the coming years.
Okay, thank you. We're now going to move to a 5-minute round, and we're going to go to Ms. Sitsabaisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. I'm going to read a quote from, I think, a letter that's already been mentioned, that was signed by the Urban Alliance on Race Relations, the National Congress of Italian Canadians, the Canadian Ethnocultural Council, and the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants. and the Metro Toronto Chinese and Southeast Asian Legal Clinic, the Urban Alliance on Race Relations past president, the Ryerson University, and the Yi Hong Foundation. And a lot of these organizations and their members are represented in my constituency and are very concerned about the cuts. Closer to the mic. Oh, you don't have your listening pieces on. Sorry. No. So the letter says, on the 7th day of May, Asian Heritage Month, during Asian Heritage Month, Rogers announced the elimination of all newscasts on its Omni TV stations. For over 30 years, Omni TV has played a vital and essential role in reflecting and connecting Canada's cultural, diverse, and multilingual communities. Omni TV news programming creates a voice for Canada's ethnocultural communities to challenge social injustices. It provides programming that pertains to their needs, and more importantly, it gives these communities information that the mainstream media does not provide. And from what we've learned, this decision was made without consultation of community members and leaders who have watched and benefited from Omni TV for decades. And Rogers, in my opinion, and I know in the opinion of many who have written to me specifically, has abandoned the spirit of Omni TV's license by eliminating the local Cantonese, Mandarin, Punjabi, and Italian news programming, and we feel, systematically dismantling Omni's ability to meaningfully serve the multilingual audiences. And I know, Mr. Pelly, if I'm saying your name right, you said that you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders, and that means, quarter over quarter trying to turn a profit. And in a conversation that I had with your vice presidents before, mentioned how, not really much has changed, that we still have services or programming in the same languages. It's just a pop culture, news-ish kind of conversation show that's happening now. But that's not what the communities are looking for. We know that there are well over 1 million people who rely on Omni, actually, for the news that they're receiving on what is happening in this country. And you may say, well, it's not making money. Well, let me hear what you have to say, and I know, Mr. Chair, if you could let me know. So what is it that you can say about the seniors and many people in my community in Scarborough who rely on the Mandarin, Cantonese, and Punjabi, and some in the Italian also, who are relying on this to get news, not just current events conversation, but news as to what's happening in our country in their language?
Yeah, I don't. We didn't take this decision lightly in any such way, but I just wish there were more of those people that were watching. So obviously, some of the people that have now come out, I'm not sure they were watching. Because the ratings speak for themselves. And ratings is, like I said, a pure form of currency. And you could not, in any such way, through the news programming and the cost of doing news programming, be sustainable in this changing market. Unfortunately, this is not 1979 anymore, or 1960 when Donnie and Marie had a 60 share. There is so much competition out there. And as a result, advertisers have just gone like this. Not only in
I'm glad you brought up advertisers, actually. I'm sorry to cut you off. It's just I don't have a lot of time.
No problem.
My understanding from the local business communities in these language communities is that they haven't really been courted by Omni. So I don't know, you're saying that you don't have the advertising revenue coming in from the communities, the Cantonese, Mandarin, Punjabi, or Italian communities. You're saying it's not coming in, and I'm speaking with local chambers of commerce and individual entrepreneurs, and they're saying that they really haven't been courted.
No, okay, I would disagree. So I think they have been. I think they have been, but that's a very
Maybe that's something to bring up with your advertising department.
Yeah, we have 32 people selling ethnic advertising, so I would disagree again.
15 seconds.
15 seconds. Well, I tend to disagree with your disagreement because I'm speaking with people on the ground, and this is what they're telling me. So it is what it is, and I'm sure my 15 seconds are up now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Mr. Lison.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you all the witnesses for coming here this afternoon. You were speaking about changing times, changing that everything is changing, the technology, and et cetera, et cetera. You know what? I know everything is changing. When I was growing up, if I wanted to talk to someone, I had to walk and talk in person. Now, 50 years later, I can sit in front of a computer and with a single touch of the screen or the button, I can actually reach someone. Therefore, of course, the world is changing. It's changing dramatically. Therefore, are you saying that you were surprised by this dramatic change and you didn't foresee it? You know what? You were talking about financial losses over the years, and now we're talking about the recent changes to Cantonese, Mandarin, Punjabi. You've changed also what you broadcasted in Polish, Ukrainian, and other languages. Therefore, shouldn't you change maybe your business model and look at it differently as a whole model? I tell you why. I personally, and I think my colleagues as well, would expect any business that operates in a community not only to draw after the community, but to give back. Therefore, if you're talking about financial losses, why don't you look at those dollars as investment back in a community that supports you in wireless, in cable, in other businesses? Because that, I think, Omni should not be looked at as a separate little piece of your business. You should look at your customers as a base that you serve, and you serve not only in this little part, but as a whole.
I appreciate that comment. The only thing that I would say is, yes, we did see this coming. That's why we've been talking about it for the last 3 years, and that's why we went to the CRTC and requested the conditions of license, and that's why we spoke to all 3 critical parties. That's why we've spoken to ethnic groups. That's why we've spoken to chambers of commerce. So we did see it coming. I understand your last point, but your first point as far as we did see it, absolutely. We saw the erosion of the advertising, but as I said, you know, $58 million is a lot in any business to actually make up in 4 years. You have to be prepared in this media world to change, and we're changing and making it as viable as we possibly can to be sustainable. I'm not sure if we weren't investing in the money that we are in Omni, that there would be anybody else that would be doing it under the conditions of license that are currently there, losing the money that we currently are, and producing the programming that we are.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, if I have any time left, I would like to offer Mr. Terence Young to ask a question.
Mr. Young?
Thank you,
have
Chair.
about a minute and a half.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Madame Watson, is it your position, or sorry, is it the position of Omni and Rogers Communications that ethnic programming, which is by its nature cultural, is like the products sold in Walmart?
Thank you for that. My unfortunate comments, and I do apologize unreservedly, unequivocally, Minister, for the flippancy of it, was meant to show that we are a private sector operation. We made a difficult business decision, and based on that, it's a private sector business decision. We have a responsibility to our shareholders and to our superiors.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Pelly, your theory is that people are upset because news they weren't watching is no longer available to watch. And I don't buy that. People don't go to their MPs and complain about things with no reason. I wanted to ask you, if you went home at the end of the day to watch the news yourself, to learn what has happened around the world that might affect your life and your country and your family and your future, And all you could get in your first language was three people chatting about issues or a soap opera instead of reliable, clear, trustworthy news on which you can plan your career and your future. Would you find that acceptable?
In 15 seconds.
So I'll say two things. First of all, I didn't say anybody was watching. I said not enough people were watching. And if more people were watching, it would be more viable. Second of all, I believe there are so many other options now that weren't available back in 1979 for people to get that information. So it is not as imperative for Omni to do it as it was 15 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Monsieur Nantel, pour 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
It works that you hear me in English and
I hear you in English.
You hear you great. And now if I speak French, est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me now in English? Great. Would you like anything to the answer that you were giving to Mr. Young?
No, I just I concur that that it is that there is no doubt it is very viable to have people watching language news in their own language.
Absolutely.
But at the exact same time, I do believe there are a plethora of opportunities for them to get that now. You can go very, very, very quickly online to get that information.
So the idea here, pour moi ici, je tiens à vous dire, c'est que
What I'd like to say is that what I've observed is that your TV is a service. That's why you're on the air. And you're also on cable. And what I've noticed, and it's very funny, actually, well, cynical rather, at the end of the parliamentary session, we are seeing the damage done by this government that let this situation become aggravated. It seems very electoral as a thing to say, but in 2011, there was a report on the challenges with digital platforms in Canada, and the government put that on a shelf and did nothing. And now we have groups, communities, that are losing a service, a news service, that has a CRTC license that was supposed to ensure that it was offered to people, and now we have business people who've lost their business model, and we have media who are converging radically, and it's difficult for you. It leads to questions like Mr. Vaughan's that says, with all of your other companies, you should fund yourselves. There's all of that complexity, and it's not given a framework. So I find it deplorable, because I have no doubt that Rogers, which is one of our largest media families, and is certainly a key player in our media landscape, is in the situation that you're describing to us today. And I don't doubt that these are difficult choices for you, but it's clear that the lax political policy, the lack of vision, has led to a failure, a problem for audiences and business people. So I give you my sympathy. You've not really had a great session here. Everyone's here to represent their constituents. That's our work. That's our job, to ask you these questions. But I'd like to tell you that you have my sympathy insofar as clearly there's a government that turned a blind eye to the arrival of new platforms, new services, the role of heritage and Canadian content, which news constitutes. It's about a Canadian vision of things. And that's what seems most striking in all of this to me. We have business people who want to do business in an area that's useful to people. People watch this service, and they're no longer able to do so because there has been no update of the context with all of these new international platforms. That's not all that I think this government has neglected, and it's clear. I'll conclude this parliamentary session, and I hope we'll have another Canadian Heritage meeting next week, because I'd like to note that for CBC Radio Canada, there was a arguable appointment with Mr. Robert Jeffrey, so I'd like to present my motion, which is the following, that the committee, pursuant to Standing Order 111, invite Mr. Robert Jeffrey, newly appointed Director of the Board of Directors of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, to examine his qualifications and competence to perform the duties of the post to which he has been appointed, and that this televised 2-hour meeting be held before Tuesday, June 23rd, 2015. This is a motion being presented because it's legitimate to ask questions about this choice, and once again, it seems to be the evidence of neglect by this government to the public broadcaster that plays the same role for minority language communities around the country and in Quebec for Anglophone and Francophone Canadians. So I see strong parallels between these two situations, and I have taken this opportunity to ask for a study on this. So thank you for appearing, and I will give the floor to my colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Nantel.
Been the motion moved, so you've all heard the motion that the committee, pursuant to Standing Order 111, invite Mr. Robert Jeffrey, newly appointed Director of the Board of Directors of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, to examine his qualifications and competence to perform the duties of the post to which he has been appointed, and that this televised 2-hour meeting be held before Tuesday, June the 23rd, 2015. Debate on that? Mr. Dykstra?
Yes, sir.
Call the vote. Debate?
No debate. No, we're going to vote.
Okay. All in favor of the motion? 2, 3. Well, they only 3 can vote there. 4. Opposed? Motion is defeated. So how many minutes have we got left here now? We have a few minutes left. We'll go back to Mr. Young for about 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Pelley, you talked about your responsibility to your shareholders, which I'm sure everybody here understands. But you currently administer a license that you hold in trust for the people of Canada. You have a responsibility to them. And it may not be a condition of your license strictly by legal definition, but you made a commitment. You made a promise to provide these new services to ethnic communities. And it sounds pretty clearly to me like you've given up. You're saying to me, well, they can go get the news on the internet. Well, I don't know too many seniors that watch news on the internet. Young people do that. They get it from Facebook and elsewhere. But most seniors don't. They're used to sitting down in their living room and watching news on television, which is the business you're in. So you're in breach of those promises. You're in breach of those commitments. So I'd like to ask you again, Mr. Vaughan asked you, why don't you relinquish the license and let somebody else give it a try? And I just want to mention a possibility. There are at least, I think, 25 Punjabi newspapers in the GTA that advertise. And I know there are a lot of very brilliant business people running those papers. And I bet a consortium could be put together, or at least, or perhaps even one business leader, to provide news in Punjabi to the Punjabi community in the GTA. Why not let somebody else have a try? Why not go to the CRTC and say, we can't do it anymore, we've given up. Let somebody else give it a try and let them have the license.
Well, again, I beg to differ that we're not serving the ethnic community. I take offense to the notion that Rogers hasn't been there for the ethnic community over the last 40 years. We've spent more money on ethnic programming than any other broadcaster. I believe that our new strategy is one that is viable and sustainable. What surprises me today is that all of you seem surprised. That's the biggest one for me, because I've been talking about this for the last 3 years. And this isn't going to be the only thing that you're going to face going forward in the broadcast industry. Omni is just the tip of it. And as the minister alluded to, you have to be prepared to change. So do you want to make any other comments?
No, I would simply note that we did commission a research study in the context of our license renewal to look at media usage patterns, and it actually does indicate that 55-plus demographic, 52% are accessing international news on the internet, 45% are accessing national news, and 36% are accessing local news on the internet. So these trends clearly do show that even older demographics are migrating to digital platforms to consume their news content, which creates additional competition for a service like Omni.
If I could add as well, if ever so briefly, in the Ontario market, we enhanced our services to the Punjabi community. The newscast in Punjabi was a national newscast done out of Vancouver, and under the new format, we now have a local to Ontario program and then a local to British Columbia program. So our Punjabi hosts in the GTA are now able to talk about specific issues to them in their market and how they view it, as opposed to having something from Vancouver at them. We are trying to grow and adapt as well as we can. This, in an election year, to answer Mr. Sullivan's question from earlier, allows us to be actually more interactive with our viewers. This allows them to go deeper into an election issue. A typical news report is 90 seconds long. And while I understand your comment about it was never meant to be flippant with respect to current affairs,
Thank you, Chair. Chair,
can
thank
replace
you. I'll give the
news.
rest of my time to Mr. Fantino.
90 seconds is not enough time to get into an issue, but a half hour is.
We will be carrying the federal debate in how many languages?
In 5
languages. First federal debate will be carrying in 5 languages. Again, if we had continued under the old scenario, that would not be done.
Okay, you've got about 30 seconds left.
Well, just very quickly, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I guess I want to just reference back to the CRTC. You've indicated that did not see this coming, etc. At the 2014 license renewal hearing, Rogers did not tell the CRTC that it intended to cancel all local news on Omni stations. And the other thing, too, of course, is the response by the CRTC. A broadcaster is not conventional broadcaster unless it offers a wide range of programming that reflects Canadian attitudes, opinions, ideas, values, artistic creativity, local programming containing newscasts, both on weekdays and the weekend, constitutes an essential part of the required programming. And finally, Mr. Chair,
I'm going to have to cut you off.
Yeah, that's fine. Well,
sorry.
I just want to hearken. You know, if you can't comply with the license, you should give it up.
Yeah, well, we are complying with the license, but thank you. But
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have to move on. Mr. Sullivan would have the floor. Mr. Vaughn?
I just, having not used my full allotment of time, I would ask the committee's indulgence to have a second go-around. I didn't use the full time, and
So Mr. Vaughn is asking for unanimous consent to get some time? No. Sorry, there's no consent. Mr. Sullivan, you have about 3 minutes.
You've stated several times that people have other options. In fact, the Italian community doesn't have another local news in Italian option. It isn't there. Nor does the Punjabi. So I agree with you that generally in Canada, in English and in French, consumers are moving away from conventional television to receive their news, not in big enough numbers to cause the kind of abandonment of news that is happening now, but certainly not in these languages. There is no other Italian facility for persons who don't have English. I agree that some of them have English and they may go somewhere else. They're certainly talking about going somewhere else for their cable and cell phone providers. The other comment you made was that that you were going to provide some kind of current affairs access to news, but correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Watson, but what you said was the Italian community would be served by a lifestyle program starting in the fall. So that's really not going to help the Italian community at all.
I don't disagree with you. I do. I am not happy with the solution I have with it with respect to the Italian service we're providing.
So fix it. Put back news.
And so we will be creating a current affairs show for them in 2016 in that language market.
But that
That's
doesn't help
all
for
I can afford, sir.
you talked about it in terms of the election campaign and in how people would be able to use that to get longer form access to current affairs. That's not going to happen in the Italian community, and you just confirmed it. Maybe in 2016, there'll be a different government then.
It's all we can afford.
I can tell you, I would be surprised if every one of you that was working in the private sector wouldn't have come to the same conclusion, having exhausted every possible opportunity that we did. I understand the role that you play, and I understand that you have to speak like you have to your constituencies. But at the same time, if you were looking at the actual business model and running it as a private business model, you would do the exact same thing. And I have let people know that it's coming, and with all due respect, we are adhering to every facet of our conditions of license. And to suggest otherwise, I think is completely unfair.
And on that note, that will have to be the last word.
A point of order.
Point of order.
The issue raised by Minister Fantino is a significant one. A change to a promised performance is properly done through a public hearing at the CRTC at the time of license renewal.
Mr. Vaughn, I'm sorry. This is not a point of order. It's
no,
a
it
point
is.
of debate.
Insofar, no, this is the point of order. Insofar as that there has not been a public hearing under the regulatory process, it would be entirely responsible to ask for this committee to reconvene and to call witnesses from the communities that have been affected.
Mr. Vaughn, I'm going to have to cut you off there. That's not a point of order. And on that note, meeting adjourned.